All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Choose Grad York session. We have a great set of panelists for you today for our event Learning About Graduate School from Our Alumni. So today's event is part of the Choose Grad York series, which will happening from Monday to Friday of this week, all at noon. And we'll put the link in the chat for you to check out further events. So today, we just want to say on behalf of the Faculty of Graduate Studies, welcome, congratulations on your offers, or best of luck for folks who are still in the waiting period to hear about your admissions decision. Before we get started with the panel today, we're going to do a land acknowledgement for the land that York University is currently on. Now, this is brand new in consultation with local Indigenous groups. So if you have attended a Faculty of Graduate Studies or York University session in previous months or years, you'll notice that this is updated and current. So First Nations people have lived on this part of Turtle Island for millennia, stewarding the land, the water, and all that contributes to life in this region. Today, the culture and presence of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples enrich the lands and people of this territory. More than 2 centuries ago, the Mississauga people welcomed settlers to this territory, providing sustenance and engaging in trade and commerce. Today, York University campuses are located on the Toronto Purchase Territory number 13, lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and lands of the Anishinaabeg of the Williams Treaties First Nations. Our campuses are also located on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. Treaty history is foundational, and it is our collective responsibility to honor the land as we honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who are yet to come. We're grateful for the opportunity to be learning, working, and thriving on this land, and we commit to learning the truth and being active in the process of reconciliation. So thank you very much. And now I'll introduce our Associate Dean Academic, Cheryl van Daalen-Smith. Over to you, Cheryl.
Thanks very much, Eileen. I'm pleased to chair this panel for all of our participants and also to thank the team that went into the development of this. That's Uzma, Eileen, and Gabriella from our graduate recruitment team. We have 3 fantastic panelists. These are alumni. And when we were meeting, I said to them that this is actually a hope panel. It's so that you participants can actually see people who have had the grit, the determination to choose York for grad studies and to see it through. So I'd like to tell you just a little bit about our 3 panelists, and then we have a whole bunch of questions that we've asked them to prepare responses to. And then with the last 15 minutes, we're going to move to questions that we feel we can answer live that happen in the Q&A box. So Blessing Owusu-Colby has a master's in education from 2024, is a dedicated educator, author, and advocate for equity and inclusivity in education. And Blessing is a 3-time York University alumni holding multiple degrees. And her master's research project focused on the experiences of Black students in schools, exploring themes of identity, belonging, and representation. Desmond A has a master's in environmental studies 2025 and is a sustainability professional where in his master's in environmental studies, Desmond's work now lands him working at ERCO Worldwide, where he supports sustainability reporting and other initiatives. Jenny Ellison has a PhD from 2010, is currently a manager of digital engagement strategies and publications for the Canadian Museum of History and the Canadian War Museum in Ottawa. So with that, I'd like to welcome everybody. We've spotlit you, so lovely. We're going to start with Desmond, and then we'll go to Blessing with our opening question, and that is, what made you decide to pursue graduate studies? Desmond.
Hi, thanks for the welcome and happy to be here. I think one of the things that really piqued my interest in regards to graduate studies was a gap which I identified within my professional studies. And I'm in the, without boring you too much, I'm in the sustainability field, and I identified that there were typically environmental justice gaps within the corporate sustainability space. And I was interested in pursuing graduate studies to kind of crystallize those gaps and then identify ways and strategic means of closing those gaps and ensuring that environmental justice outcomes were considered within corporate sustainability as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And Blessing, what made you decide to pursue grad studies?
Oh, there we go. Hi, so for me, so I completed a Master of Education and I decided to pursue my master's because I wanted to deepen like my understanding of education beyond the day-to-day classroom practices and what we learned in our Teachers College program, which I also did at York. So I just wanted to go to the next step with that. And like as a teacher, I was already like seeing like real issues that were in schools, and I just wanted an opportunity to think more like critically about teaching and learning and equity and like student success. And for me, the master's was just a way to grow professionally while also reflecting more intentionally on the work that I am doing. And I also just wanted to challenge myself and open up opportunities for later. So, I have some desire to perhaps get seconded to York one day and work with like the Faculty of Education or ministry or, become an admin. I just have different desires and different things. And before pursuing my master's, I talked to other people in those fields and they had their master's and they encouraged me to get it as well. So that was more of another reason why I decided to get it. Yeah.
And two things stood out for me there that you wanted challenge and you wanted growth.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to stick with you, Blessing. What was your experience like when applying for your program? Do you have any application tips for folks that might be applying
Yeah.
later?
Okay, so I would say the experience was manageable, but you definitely require time to plan and to be clear about why you want to pursue the degree. And like one thing that helped me was like being honest about my professional goals and like how the program connected to like the work that I was already doing in education, because I was teaching at the same time. And so my biggest tip I would say would be to start early, especially with references and your statement of intent. Like that was like the core of the application for me was my personal interest, my why, like why did I want to do this? Because the why I feel is the foundation of like everything that we do. And so I made sure to spend a lot of time on that. That way I was able to get other people to help me look at it as well. And something that just reflecting not just my accomplishments, but like just making sure, like I said, the why do I want to do this? How would it benefit not only me, but like benefit, like the world we're in as well.
Mhm.
And I would always say to choose, of course, references that actually know your work and can speak to your strengths and, like speak to the things you do in a meaningful way, I would say.
Thank you, Blessing. Desmond, what do you think? What was your experience like when applying?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's pretty similar. I guess that what I'll just add is typically applicants are advised to reach out to supervisors. In potential supervisors, in my context, I didn't need to do that. But what I still did was to make sure I really researched those that I'll eventually, like to work with academically, if given the chance. And then more importantly, finding a connection between my unique story and experiences professionally and personally
Mm.
and their research, and then making that point very clear in my research so that it's not a blanket SOP or essay, application essay. It's
Mm.
something that really connects to what I need to achieve and also what the potential supervisor is going to need to advance their research as well. And making sure that those two things connect and have mutual benefit for the faculty, for everyone, and even for my journey as well.
Thank you. Now, for our audience, all doctorates and many master's degrees require you to have a graduate supervisor. Not all. And so this is for Jenny, and then I'll go to Blessing afterwards. Could you describe your working relationship with your graduate supervisory committee? How did you find them? How often did you meet? Yeah, what's your reflection on that? and
Yeah,
welcome.
hi, thanks. Hi, everybody. So I researched my, supervisory panel before I got to the university, and then actually formalized it once I arrived at York in 2004. And I did that partly in conversation with my chosen supervisor because what I wanted to do was to have a panel that kind of reflected the expertise and the guidance that I needed. And so I actually had a Canadian historian, American historian, and a feminist philosopher on my panel. So I really wanted to get input from different areas. As a group, like as a group of the three, we didn't meet very often as a large group. I met mostly with my supervisor a couple times a semester. And then in periods where there was a lot of activity, like the comprehensive exams or, phases of writing, then I would meet with her on a more regular basis. With my second reader, I met her about once a semester, and we always met in really targeted ways. And my advisor sort of played the role of guiding me on the research question and the methodology and the overall narrative arc of the dissertation. I worked with my second and third readers on specific challenges on like the contextual history and the theoretical underpinnings of the dissertation. Just want to see if there's anything else I wanted to say. Um, my third reader I met only rarely. So in that case, I would drop off drafts to her and she would get back to me in writing. So, it was a little bit different with everyone, but I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thank you. And Blessing, for a master's in education, is there a supervisor?
Yeah, so that's if you choose. So there's three options. There's a course only option. There's the MRP, which is major research paper or project now option. And then there's a thesis option. So I went with initially I was just course only, and I felt like I just had a change midway through, and I said, you know what, I want to pursue doing a project. So I contacted guidance and I asked for guidance on what can I do, because I don't want to write a traditional paper alone. I know it comes with it, but I wanted to do something else. So I suggested to them, would it be okay if I did a children's book? And they said, of course, nobody's done that before. So I accompanied like a lot of research. The final product of that research was the children's book that I published, which is Abra's Adventures, a Taste of Home. But my research focused on the experiences of Black students in schools. And so from that came a children's book that I wrote about like my childhood in Vaughan, Ontario, growing up, and it came from that. So I had a supervisor because I had to do that with someone there, and I would say it was a great relationship. I didn't have much experience with like professors and at York just because I was limited coming to class only the evening. I wasn't seeing much people and I was working at the same time. So I wasn't too involved in the York community. So finding one was not hard. I reached out to my professor who connected me with other people who she thought would best suit what I was doing. And so I reached out to these people and I met them and they gracefully gave me their time and I showed them, this is my vision, this is what I want to do. And then I connected with one better, and from there, Dr. Malade Osibudu. And so from there, we started working on the vision. So we would set meetings. I would say like initially it was like every 2 weeks, because that was when I was doing the paper process. But when it came down to the book, we would meet maybe once a month, and then I would, share what I had with the book, my manuscript, my this and that. And she'd give me feedback and, she'd give me comments. Okay, Blessing, this is where I think you should expand on. I don't know if you need so much of this in there. So her support was very like pivotal to this work that I did and this book that I've written. And like just providing guidance and like, asking me questions and me also being able to ask her questions. And like, I felt like our relationship worked so well because it was built on like openness, responsiveness, and just being willing to work with one another wherever we are. So, yeah, I would say it was a great
Yeah.
experience there. Mhm.
So many things are connecting for me, but this gives way to, I think, the next question, because you really are
Mhm.
talking about the ways in which that sort of your roles, their roles. So this is for Jenny first and then Desmond. So we're still talking about the supervisory relationship, and you called it that 3 times, Blessing. So it's really important. So Jenny, what roles and responsibilities did you enact to ensure that your supervisory relationship thrived?
Yeah, thanks. I think the number one thing I would say is that you should be proactive with your supervisory team and ask them how they would like to communicate. How would they like to give you feedback and how often they'd like to meet? You can't necessarily rely on your supervisor to do that for you. And it's a good way to set out, right out front, like set good boundaries and understand, a little bit about the working relationship that you can have with your team. I do want to say I made a lot of mistakes with my supervisory team. I was at York for 6 years. So luckily after a couple of years, I smoothed that out, but I just wanted to share some of those. I over relied on email. I think my expectation was that all three of them would work together collaboratively all the time. And really, in the end, it was often my supervisor I needed to work with. And then, as I mentioned in my last answer, like I would have more targeted conversations with my team. And so I think a lesson learned for me was just to be more proactive and clear about that because I look back sometimes now and laugh as somebody who's supervised people and who acts as a manager at work at some of the approaches I took when I was younger. Maybe I've improved over time. And then the last thing I would say is that other than sort of trying to set up a positive, professional relationship with your team, is something to work on is learning how to accept feedback. You're not always going to get a gold star from your supervisory team. They're there to make you a better scholar. And something I can say, in my professional career, as I mentioned, I've mentored students. I've also acted as a manager. And this is probably the number one challenge I encounter as somebody who hires and supervises people is getting defensive or upset and not really being able to take in feedback. So I would just say, keep in mind that your supervisory team hopefully will be your cheerleaders, but sometimes they may be there to give you constructive feedback. And something you might want to think through is like how best to manage that in your relationship with them, because they really are there. They really want the best for you. And sometimes that means being really honest with you about things that could be going better.
Yeah, there's something called adopting a growth mindset that we at York are really wanting to help our students with. So Desmond, how about you? What
Well,
roles and responsibilities did you enact, to ensure your supervisory relationship thrived?
yeah, well, I mean, I'll be honest. I think I had an exceptional supervisor, and we had an exceptional relationship. It was really, really great. Um, but one thing that I realized quickly was it wasn't just about, how great she was, but I also had to bring something to the table. So I would always make sure I came prepared. I had met deadlines. If I hadn't met it, I would communicate why. This is what I was stuck in. This is what I think I should go into, but I'm not too sure. And then when I would give when I would like offer this information, she would give me feedback, and I took those feedback like investments in my eventual, degree, right? And I found that that relationship with her support, her care, her patience, direction, going above and beyond was really something that was very pivotal to my journey. And when you have a supervisor like that, you can't afford to let her down. So these were some of the things, and this is how I handled my relationship with my supervisor.
I like that you said you brought something to the table also. And just for our audience to just want to summarize some of these key points before I go to the next question. We heard be proactive, talk openly about preferred communication styles and establishing boundaries, be prepared. And I had said co-own your success. So that's sort of what you also said, Desmond. And then also with Jenny to shift to want feedback and then to consider the feedback. And you might want to do the 72-hour rule when you get the feedback. Go for 72 hours and then go back to it. Okay, really fantastic. So Desmond, I'm going to stay with you. Can you speak about any frustrations or challenges you experienced during your degree?
Yeah, a couple. Unfortunately, one of the things that I experienced was a little bit of an imposter syndrome, and I wondered whether my ideas were valid, whether my opinions were, important and worthy of the space. But this is where, once again, my relationship with my supervisor really came in because she really went above and beyond, always believing in me, always pushing me, always causing me to think deeper. and that's how I navigated that space. And then the other thing too was, I mean, you have family that loves you, you have support, you have friends, but at the end of the day, it's you alone who understands your thesis. You're the only one who's gonna stay up all night, write up all the words, you know, have so many drafts, delete drafts, st things like that. And uh, it was a bit lonely sometimes. It was a bit, hard sometimes. But like I said earlier, with set support, with people supporting you and backing you, how can you afford to give in and fail? And that's how I really handled
Mhm.
those challenges. Yeah.
Mhm. It sure does take, we were talking about this when we met, it sure does take some degree of grit,
Yeah.
sticking with your own future. So, Blessing, how about you? Can you speak about any frustrations or challenges you experienced?
Yeah, so I'll first piggyback off of Desmond because the
Great.
imposter syndrome for me was like also there. I just felt like because I one of the reasons why I pivoted to the MRP options because I always wanted to write a children's book because I always said I want a book that I would have wanted to pick up if I was in a library at 7 years old that I didn't see. So I had that passion and I wanted to do the masters and like I was able to combine those two things, but then I felt like there's so many other books in the library. Like, why am I like, what is the benefit of my book going to be on the shelf? So I had a little bit of that going on. But my biggest challenge, I would say, was like balancing graduate work while teaching at the same time. And to be a teacher, your work doesn't leave when school is done. It follows you like everywhere. Like you're driving or thinking about, oh, how can I relate this to fractions? You're in the grocery store, you're trying to connect it to something. Like it's just like you eat, sleep, and breathe teaching. It's just part of who you are. And so planning and assessing and doing all that while the managing coursework I found was challenging. So it'd be like go to work and then go to York right after. And so that required me to have lots of discipline and sacrifice. And I had to be very responsible. And there are definitely moments where I felt like stretched and like mentally tired, and like especially during busier
Mm.
times of the year, like report card season, things like that. But just making sure I remembered like my why. Okay, why am I doing this? Because there's times where I'm like, maybe this wasn't a good option. But remembering my why and also like just having a growth mindset was really like helpful during these frustrations. And also like another challenge was making space for deep academic thinking when I was already giving so much of myself as a teacher.
Mm.
So like I would say all those things did help me build for like stronger time management and like, just having some time to like calm down and like relax a little bit.
Mhm.
But working while going to school, I would say was the utmost
Mhm.
biggest challenge of it all. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a lot about that you had a lot of balance. You had to impose balance in your life. You had to claim
Yes.
balance. You had to create balance. Yeah, remembering your why, that really stands out for me. Thank you. So this is for you, Blessing, and then I'll come to Jenny afterwards. It's sort of similar. So how did you stay organized with managing deadlines and readings and less and lectures, and then, as you say, thinking about fractions at the grocery store? And how did you overcome feeling stressed or overwhelmed?
Okay, so like staying organized was like essential for me. I like me and my calendars are best friends, like and sticky notes, like they're everywhere. They're my phone, like I make sure everything is like synced together so I know. I was also okay to like it took me a while to accept this, but it's okay to ask for help sometimes and ask for extensions. Like if I knew I couldn't meet a deadline, I would let it be known ahead of time, and like almost always, like every situation I've ever had to do that, there was always understanding. I was never a no. It was always like, okay, so how can we help? What can I do? Or what would be suitable for you to get this done? Because it's always for me, like I'd rather take more time and give quality work than to just something that is not my best. And so with that understanding, that intention in mind, I feel like it always worked to my advantage. I heavily relied on planning ahead. Um, and breaking big tasks into smaller ones
Mhm.
to make it very much manageable. Also being intentional with my time and realistic about what I can complete each week. So, letting my supervisor know, like, okay, this is what I can get this done. And also she had a busy schedule because she teaches as well. So making sure that my time and her time aligned and being mindful of that. When I felt overwhelmed, reminding myself to not focus on everything at once, but just the next step that's in front of me. So like this is the only task at the forefront that you need to get done. Just work to get that task done. Because sometimes I'll just look at the overall thing rather
Mhm.
than just the process of what I was doing. And just, I think it's very important to give yourself some grace and like recognize that consistency matters more than like perfection. So I would say that's how I managed that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Now, Jenny, you did a doctorate. You were with us at York for 6 years. How did you stay organized with a large project?
So in terms of organization, especially with the doctorate, it's sort of a long haul degree, and 6 years can seem like forever or four, depending on what the structure is of your program. But starting out with sort of a sense of how you're going to manage your time through that program. So, what first year or two for coursework and comprehensive exams, making sure your research, like the scope of your research is appropriate, and then blocking time for writing. So I did come in with sort of a plan of how I would divide my time across those years. On a day-to-day basis, I do find organization is very personal. For me, I found like time blocking really helps. So I worked as a teaching assistant, throughout my career at York. So that on my teaching days, I was very disciplined. I always asked for the earliest tutorial, and then the rest of that day became my teaching day. And I sort of, kind of tried to contain as much as I could
Mm.
the 10 hours I did a week for my teaching assistantship sort of within a day and things like that. So, the in terms of organization, that was sort of a key one for me. I also wanted to really, especially for anyone in the audience who's doing a doctorate, this also, I think, doubles as advice regarding imposter syndrome, is like try to get to know your cohort if you're able to do that, in your core classes or within your program. Because what I did that worked really well in my first and second years was sharing the load with the comprehensive exams. I had a reading group that we got to know and trust one another, and we had to read 5 books a week. So we divided those up and shared our notes. And it was like a good strategy for getting through all the work and getting us to the exam phase of the doctorate. Likewise with teaching and being a teaching assistant, like you can work with your peers to come up with ideas for tutorials and to set plans and things like that. Like, so I just think if you're able to draw on the network of people who's in your program, I think it can really pay benefits in terms of stress reduction. And the last thing I want to do is just like a shout out to all the services that are available at York to help you overcome your stress. And that includes like health services, mental health services, study support, writing support, librarians, archivists, grad people. Like there are, aside from your supervisory committee, like one of the benefits of going to York is it's just a massive university with every imaginable possible resource for student success. So I drew on those kinds of services all the time throughout my degree. And, York is a big place, but I think as Desmond said, one of the things you can do is be proactive. And if you do need help, and as Blessing said, if you do ask for help, usually people will say yes and help you find a solution.
This is why an alumni panel is just so instructive, because you've succeeded and now you can look backwards and say to people about to do work, this is what you should do. So let's talk a little bit about timely completion, or what we call forward momentum, in long haul degrees. Long haul meaning a master's and a PhD. So this is first for Jenny, then I'm going to come to you, Desmond, to ask you, what steps did you take to maintain that forward momentum in your degree so that you successfully completed A, and that you did so in a timely way?
Okay. So, I mean, I sometimes feel when I'm talking to grad students, I come off sounding a bit like a mom, which I am. But I think that, something in hindsight, as Cheryl mentioned, hindsight is very valuable. And one thing I think that I can see that I did in hindsight and that I would encourage people to do is to have a life, to block out the time that you're working on your degree and to still make time for your family. It could be a part-time job or like everything else that fills your bucket or helps you survive grad school. And I think it's really important to have that because there will be periods that are tough. The job market can be tough, and it's really important to make sure you have, your professional life, which is doing your degree, but you're also somebody outside of that world and to make sure you're nurturing and sustaining that. So that's my sort of brief mom interlude. The other thing, I guess, the piece of advice that I got that I struggled to follow, but I know in hindsight was correct was like not, and it relates to this idea of boundaries, is like not to over research. And so I remember at the end of my third year at York, I was setting out on a major research trip. To go and do oral history interviews all through Western Canada. At that time, my supervisor said, "Why are you doing that? You already have enough research to complete your doctorate." And I did it anyway because I couldn't resist. But she was right. Like I think draw on your committee for that kind of advice. And like I just couldn't help myself in that case. But that probably could have been a second book instead of all one dissertation. So just make sure like the size and scope of your work is appropriate, and your committee can help you determine that. So don't be me. Effectively is my second tip.
Or be you because you finished and you did well and now you're mentoring students. So, yeah, when is enough? That's a good question that we ask our supervisor. When is enough? How about you, Desmond? Steps you took to maintain forward momentum and finish your degree in a timely way?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say the one thing that underpins every other thing that I did was my faith in God and my Christian belief, and that really kept me grounded in what I could do and what I should be able to do. And then also it was the fact that, and I talked about this earlier, my professors, supervisor, the belief they had in me, and the fact that I knew I couldn't afford to disappoint or fail them because, pouring so much into me, how can I just give up and how can I just disappoint them and fall along the way, right? So that was really something that drove me. And then the last thing would be, I guess, how I approach big problems, right? So generally, research thesis is a huge undertaking, but if you one of the things I learned was to break it down into specific milestones, and I have a bit of exposure to project management as well, so I kind of employ that to break it down into chunks. So I basically stopped looking at the mountain and I just looked at the next step. And once I finish the next step, then I move on to the next step, and then eventually the steps build up and became a nice looking mountain.
Huh. Okay, I wrote down project management. I might want to circle back to you on that. Fantastic.
Thanks.
Okay, and for sure, having grounding in a higher power in God, having balance and all that really makes a difference in many of our students. Thank you for sharing that piece of you. That was very lovely. Okay, Desmond, I'm sticking with you though. You're still with me, and then I'm going to go to Blessing, and that is what has been your experience like? She just graduated, I think. So
Yeah.
transitioning from school to the workforce.
Yeah. So I applied code. I sent out maybe like 100 applications. And yeah, and I had a couple of interviews, and eventually the place where I'm working at worked out. But the reason why I bring this up is because some of the specific experiences I was able to get while at York were very key to landing this role. So for instance, my profs pushed me and gave me an opportunity to conduct green building research for
Hmm.
York University because they wanted to come up with a green building strategy in line with the net zero goals. And so I won't bore you with the details. And that was really a great thing for me because that caused me to meet a lot of faculty, a lot of profs. I was invited to events, and that practical experience and the opportunity to also be on the energy working group as well um, was a great experience. And so when I was at an interview, one of the things that made me stand out was I had that practical, large scale, institutional experience that they could look at and say, "Oh, this guy can do the work," right? And so that was a really key thing, and it's something I'm always grateful for my time at Yale, getting involved in other things beyond my studies to be able to make that transition to transition back into my career very smooth. Yeah.
Mhm. Fantastic. How about you, Blessing? Seems like you didn't leave. work,
No,
but yeah, so talk about that.
yeah, so my experience is obviously a bit unique because I was already teaching while completing my Master of Education. So for me, it was less about transitioning into the workforce and more about like applying what I
Uh,
was learning in like real time. And so like that was one of the most valuable parts of the experience because I could like immediately connect theory to practice and like I can like literally take what I was learning and like okay, this is interesting. Let me try this in the classroom. So I was able to experience or bring some experience. And also, because I was experiencing things in the classroom, I was also able to bring that into my master's as
right.
well when we do group discussions or, share perspective. Not everybody in the program was an educator. So that also supported my learning there. And the program helped me think critically about my role as an educator and strengthen the way I approach teaching and learning. Like I feel like have a different approach than I did. And I think the experience that I had as a teacher currently and what I was
Mm,
learning had a lot to do with that. And also helped me look at new possibilities for beyond the classroom. Like
mm.
it solidified for me after doing the master's that I don't want to be in the classroom for a long time. Like I want to pursue other things. So that's something I really took out of for sure.
Yeah, and just for the panelists, you're going to see me now be a bit more nimble with the questions. Just we're watching our time, and there's some really nice questions in the Q&A we want to get to. Blessing, you kind of spoke a little bit about the skills and competencies. So I'm going to move to Jenny with this one and ask
Mhm.
Jenny to answer what skills or competencies that you learned in grad school have you used in your career the most? Blessing started that discussion. Why don't you add to that?
Super. As somebody who went to university into her 30s, I think something people often said, and I bet still say, is university isn't the real world. But having now worked in the professional world for 15 years, I would say actually it is. And that, going to grad school is a microcosm of what you're going to do eventually as you move into the world. So just quickly, research, obviously my degree was very research driven. I treat everything like a research project. And I always tell other people to do that too. If you're not sure what to do for your career, treat it like a research project. If I
Huh.
have a new project, before I start it, I research it and then I create like a project outline, just like I would for a dissertation. And, like a lot of people, all over Canada right now, I'm finding myself in the position of having to learn a lot about AI in a short period of time. So again, I go back to my research skills for that. Being able to, critically and quickly review information and then, write about it or give advice on it. That's all stuff that you do in grad school. I also want to give a shout out to teaching. We haven't talked a lot about it, but I would imagine that many people on the call will be teaching assistants or potentially work as contract teachers at the university. And like, again, this is one of the most important things I ever did in my career. I no longer work as a professor or a teacher, but I think first of all, it teaches you a lot about empathy. It teaches you how to have difficult conversations, how to lead and manage a room and a conversation, manage time. Classrooms are like these like complex organisms and you have to keep things moving and keep everyone included and engaged. And so it's a great training ground for being on a team or in a workplace. And lastly, just like resilience and flexibility. We could have a whole separate call. I could tell you all the mistakes I made, the times I got knocked down and I had to pivot and change. Yes, things have worked out very well for me over time, but I think, one way that grad school is the real world is that you just like it's in the real world, you have successes and failures. There's barriers, there's challenges to overcome. There's almost always people to help you. So I
Mm.
think a lot of the skills there, but I think so not thinking of it so narrowly as just being at school, but actually thinking of it as kind of, if it works for you, thinking of it kind of as training ground for, who you will be in the future is not the worst framing.
Very helpful. Thank you. So I want to ask all of us this question. Grad studies, as I mentioned, is about having grit and perseverance and wanting to grow. How has grad school changed you for the better? I want to start with Desmond.
Yeah, it's taught me to think a little bit more deeper about things, to appreciate other perspectives and other ideas, to believe in myself a lot more and
Mm,
believe in my capabilities, and
mm,
to generally, search and push for more opportunities and these are, I would say, my standout lessons from grad school. And I think anyone, looking to start on this journey is making the right decision. And you just have to find yourself, find your space, and just flourish.
Love that. How about you, Blessing? How has grad school changed you for the better?
Sorry. I would say that it has changed me by helping me become more disciplined, more reflective, and more confident in my voice. When you start off as a teacher, you're kind of shy because there's so much people who have been teaching way before
Mm,
you, and I always lost my voice or I didn't have it. And like being in this program, like it helped me find that voice. It's taught me how to persevere, especially when I'm tired, overwhelmed, or unsure, pushing me to think more like critically, communicate more clearly, trust my ability to contribute in meaningful ways in academic and professional spaces. And also, I feel like I came out the experience stronger, more focused, and aware of like what I'm capable of. So, yeah, overall, it gave me professional and academic growth.
fantastic. And Jenny, how about you?
It probably mostly just reinforced my last answer. Like I think a lot of the skills I brought into the workplace, mentalities and things like that, absolutely were shaped at grad schools. And in terms of
Mm,
like what I learned, I had I was lucky to go on and work in history. So I mean, it's not a word of like I still look at my comprehensive exam notes like multiple times a year. So in terms of the concrete learning, I still go back to that
amazing.
all the time. And the
Yeah.
last thing I would say is like friendship. Again, I know we're here for like the hard stuff, but I just went on vacation with all my best friends from grad school in February. So, you're
Love
building
that.
lifelong relationships. There's a lot going on, but it's really a happy and exciting time.
I love that. So we have folks in the audience that have applied. Some have an answer, some are, considering. So I want to ask all three of you, why choose York for grad studies? I want to start with Blessing because you chose York 3 times, I think. So what would you say to the audience? Why
Yes.
choose York for grad school?
So I chose York because it offers like I strongly feel it offers strong academic support while also giving students room to grow in meaningful ways. My experience at York helped me connect theory to practice, especially as someone who was already working in the field.
Mm,
York also gave me the opportunity to engage with ideas around equity, critical thinking, and real world impact, which mattered to me a lot. And I also think it's a strong choice for students who want a program that challenges them, supports their growth, and
mm,
helps them think more critically about their field. For
mm,
me, York was a place where I was able to develop both academically and professionally. And also, York to me felt like home. It was close. Like, I personally felt like I didn't have to go out of my way. It was just like, it just worked so well, which is why I came back for the third time.
yeah.
And yeah, honestly, it felt like home. One thing I remember when I started my undergrad was like I want to be close to home, and I had so much other offers, but I'm like York is right here, like it's close to home. It's part of my home. And I brought that with me throughout the other degrees as well. So
Mhm. Thank
yeah.
you. Jenny, why should people choose York for grad studies?
I think probably echoing some of my other answers, but I think, you can see just from the three of us on this call, like a really like interdisciplinary, broad range of expertise that you can draw on, as a student. And then beyond that, like the wealth of services that are available to you as a student, the depth of the library, all those kinds of student services, the support for you as a teaching assistant, like there's a lot to benefit from at the university. And lastly, I'd say, I went to 3 different universities, a little bit different than Blessing, and I taught at 4 others. And York absolutely has the most diverse student population I've
Mm.
encountered at any of those 7 universities. And it really is a benefit to be challenged by and encounter people with a different life experience from you. It's such an intangible part of the York experience, I'd say.
Thank you. And Desmond, how about you? Why
Yeah,
choose York?
I'm not going to repeat everything. I basically just say come here for the flexibility to pursue your academic and professional dreams. Come here for a great welcoming and diverse community that is welcoming, that is supportive, that cares about you. And come here just for the, a great academic experience. And I don't think anyone who, it's really set on this path is making a mistake. and will actually come with the right attitude, with the right plans, will really come out great in their academic life and in their professional lives as well.
Thank you. Okay, Eileen, we have some nice questions in the Q&A. I'm going to turn to you now to take us through some of those.
Definitely. And one question before I do that, Cheryl, are you yourself open to questions too?
Why not?
Okay. So I'll start with you, just because this has come up more than once. Someone was asking, well, someone phrased it this way, but other people have been asking similar questions. What if there's friction with a
Mhm.
supervisor,
Right.
or is there like when you start with a supervisor, do you stay with that same supervisor? What does that kind of process look like if you can speak to that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I heard these three panelists talk about it as a relationship, and I'll add the word a mutual relationship, one that everybody brings their best self to. Sometimes there's conflict, and we have grad program directors who help students or supervisors navigate a little bit of conflict. It's often about a misunderstanding, misreading an email. And so we try to help you sort of have that conversation transparently with the other person and try to navigate your way through. Rarely it happens where a student or a supervisor say, maybe I'm not the right person. Maybe this relationship isn't the right person. And so you would be assisted to try to find somebody new. Back to you, Eileen, for other questions for our panelists.
Awesome. And for our panelists as well, it's completely up to you, but we do have some questions that are asked, like they're asking you by name. If you want to answer in the Q&A, you absolutely can. If not, I'll post them. But a couple questions, and you kind of spoke to this already, but especially for Jenny, since you had that teaching assistant role, balancing that, and I mean, I know you mentioned that you took early morning seminars and that probably set your day up, but balancing that, your dissertation, your other work, your personal life, I think a lot of people are just unfamiliar with TAing, and so if you could speak to that.
Sure. Well, as Cheryl noted up front, I did graduate from York in 2010, so I don't necessarily want to say that it will be exactly the same now, although I would imagine so. So I was offered a teaching assistantship as part of my funding package for the university, and then assigned to courses based on my um, research areas. And in the end, I did take one strategy I would say is I was able to take the same course year over year and kind of request it for my first 3 years at York, so that I wasn't necessarily repeating the or having to do new readings every year. Once I got later in my degree and I was deeper into the writing phase, one of the things that allowed me, I think, to stay fresh and kind of keep learning, which is something I need, is I started to take TA-ships in new areas, and I really ended up having a lot of fun because I got to know different professors in the program, and kind of pushed myself in some cases into sort of new elements of Canadian history, and it was really beneficial. In terms of time management, I will also say just transparently that I did benefit from having external funding for the first 4 years of my PhD. And so that certainly helps with time management because I didn't take on any extra teaching until I was in my very last year of the program and I was substantially done the doctorate. If that's something that's possible to you in any way, taking on debt or getting external funding, obviously that latter part is a bit harder to do, but that was certainly something I did. And then, as I said, I tend to think that organization tends to be really personal, but for me, I actually, not always, but I actually tended to structure my life like a job. And so I tried to always block out time for my hobbies, for my friends. I tried to keep my weekends partly free. And then when I had to, like I had a conference paper I was working on or, grading and things like that, then I would push into the evenings or the weekends. So I really found that for me anyway, the way my brain works, I always need a little bit of a break during the day. I know some people prefer to kind of stretch it out or start really late and stuff, but for me, what worked in time management was really kind of, and I don't want to pretend that I think a PhD is a job, just for anybody on the call. Like, I know that there's value in having getting an education and deep thinking and critical thinking. It's just for me, the way my brain works, I treated it a little bit like a job, and that helped me also balance my time. I treated it not quite 9 to 5, but I treated it like something that was really structured, and I imposed that structure when it wasn't available to me.
We've definitely heard that before, that treating it like a job. There was a setup in there that couldn't have been more perfect. Tomorrow at noon, our Choose Grad York session is how to pay for graduate school. So we will be talking about any form of financial support available to students. So funding being a main one, but also scholarships, both internal, government, and external, and then needs-based finances. So the Choose Grad York link is in the chat. And I would encourage you to sign up for that because a lot of those awards are not only entrance awards, you can apply in your first year for your second year. So you too could potentially get an external grant. We have many questions, and this is for all our panelists. People are really, I think, nervous about making mistakes in their application. So, not that everyone has to answer, but if there's anything you might have done differently, or anything that maybe you talk to peers about, or just anything you might counsel folks to avoid as part of their application process. Um, Whoever wants to answer, whoever's able to, please feel free to jump in.
Sorry, can you please, like, is that written somewhere? I would just like to look at it. If
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
okay. The
So
questions, or
there's
can you read
probably
it
three or four
again?
questions in the
Okay.
Q&A open, asking about common mistakes or what would you do differently, um, and practical application strategies. So it's just like, um, maybe it would be I didn't review my statement of interest enough, or I would have applied more or fewer places. Um, I would say, just from an admissions perspective, one thing would be not paying attention to timelines and deadlines. Um,
Mhm.
and staying organized, to use a common theme as well, and just making sure that you're on top of stuff and that you have it all written out and planned to hopefully be even earlier than the deadline, because things can get really hectic at the last minute. So that's my 2 cents there. But anyone else?
Yeah, I'd probably say perhaps being open to applying somewhere else as well. Like I put all my eggs in my basket at York. I didn't apply anywhere else, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm not taking my own advice. Because I was so confident that like I knew this is where I wanted to be, and like I really felt strongly about, like I felt God was gonna make that happen for me. So I'm like, I'm gonna go to York. Even if I don't get to York, I'm gonna get into York. Like any which way it's gonna happen. But like what I probably would have done, which I felt like I should have done afterwards, was, man, while I was waiting, I'm like, maybe I should have applied to other schools too, in case I didn't get into York as much as I wanted it. So that's what I would probably suggest there.
Yeah. And one to weigh in as well, one thing that I think I did differently from other applications was I tried to reach out to like past students on LinkedIn from York, and then I kind of like pitch my essay application essay to them, and then I'll take their feedback, and then I'll constantly refine it to, based on their feedback. Yeah. And then I think I touched on this earlier. Another thing that I would say is that if it's applicable, you need to find that unique connection point that touches like what you want to do, your personal experience, and what the potential supervisor or professor, research is looking at. Because at the end of the day, one of the things I noticed was that carries quite a bit of weight. Maybe not on the administrative side, but that can really, go a long way to help with an admission decision or to help with your application. And so something to look at once again if it's not too late for you.
I mean, it's been a minute since I applied, honestly. I would say just in general, a detail, make sure you read and answer every question. And this goes for both your application to grad school as well as, you know, applying for little and big grants. There's tons of those, by the way. I mean, in my graduate program in history, there were a lot of micro grants that you could get. Make sure you answer every question, attach every document. Um, just, pay attention to the details of the application, because sometimes it's really I did have that happen to me once where I did something wrong and I missed on a competition because of that. So once it happens to you once, I think it doesn't happen again, but just something to keep in mind.
Definitely. And advice that's really applicable for, yeah, not just graduate applications, but any applications or any situation. Last question. I think that sometimes people are a bit confused about what the day-to-day looks like for graduate studies. And sometimes when I'm explaining, the format, and I say, thesis-based masters, you're taking 4 courses and doing research, and they think it's 4 courses a term, since that's what undergrad looked like. But if you could maybe speak to, and this is maybe reaching a little bit back, but when you were a master's, like how did a day flow, or like how did you organize yourself? I mean, Jenny's already talked about how it was treating like a job and fitting that between 9 to 5, but like in an average day, were you going to class and doing research and TAing, or did like what any comments you have on the structure?
My structure looked different again because of education, but my first year I would say was just courses. So I did courses, and then I went to Costa Rica. I did the last Noobs course in Costa Rica, which was nice. And then after that was that September. So my last 2 terms was I spent all that time on just the MRP. So that required me to just like that was my only focus. I wasn't doing any other course or anything like that. So which was nice because I can lock in on that, which did take a lot of time because having to write the paper, I had to write 2 different papers and conduct all this research and meet with the supervisor before starting the manuscript for the book and looking for an illustrator and all that stuff. So my MRP was equivalent of 6 credits. So I would say like that's how it was structured for me, but I don't know how it is for other programs.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to my experience because you had the flexibility to pick, if I'm not mistaken, either 2 or 3 courses every sem or every term. And if you chose more courses, then you'd have less courses to do in the next year. So well, that's what I did. I tried to do as many courses as I could in the first year, so I could TA, I could do a research assistantship as alongside the work I was doing with the Office of Sustainability. And so for a typical day in the first year, a lot of going to class and studies and assignments. But in the second year was more of like TA stuff and then my research and then what I was doing with the Office of Sustainability as well. So I think every program is different in that way.
Yeah, I echo Desmond. As it changes at the doctorate level, it will change a little bit every year because your first year will be heavily involved in your coursework, which makes it a little harder. I saw lots of questions about part-time work. Like I did know lots of people working part-time, but it is more challenging in the first couple of years of the doctorate where you are spending more of your day-to-day, this is my experience, more of your day-to-day time on campus and in the classroom. Especially if you're TAing on top of that, that's definitely a very, those can be some really full days. But once you move into comprehensive exams and then writing, you actually have a large, like a very open calendar sometimes. And that's a different kind of challenge, is trying to figure out how to structure that open time and manage all the different priorities that you have. And in that case, that's when it kind of becomes, I think, a question of, imposing some kind of structure, even if that structure is you're somebody who likes to work between 4 and 10 at night. Like if that's your thing, that's your thing. But just making sure you give some structure to your days. Otherwise, it's really easy if you have that open time sometimes to fill it with maybe the less um, productive things.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And yeah, when you get into the later, especially for the PhD, and you super have to be self-motivated and keep yourself accountable 100%. Thank you everyone for your questions. There were a couple we didn't get to, but if you email fgsapply at yorku.ca, which I will share on the screen, then we can always pass along your questions. We can answer any ones that we had. Before we wrap up, I just want to do a quick plug for the Faculty of Graduate Studies social channels, where you can learn more about events like this and student or and alumni profiles, just everything to keep updated with Grad at York. And then I'll leave this slide up because it does have our contact info. Again, if you didn't have questions answered or anything about admissions, anything about today's event, we would love to hear from you. But thank you again to our panelists and for everyone for attending. Cheryl, do you have any last words?
No, we just hope that our guests that are watching and listening to these panelists will choose York. You can get her done. You can find your way here, and you see our three panelists survived. They thrived. They're doing well. And I just wanted to thank Jenny, Desmond, and Blessing again. It's been a real journey to listen to your experiences. So thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Take care.